This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.
Hey love, welcome to Confidently Cherished. I am Keshia Rice, and I'm a dating coach for women of faith who are looking to break generational patterns and create healthy relationships. Today I wanted to talk to you about self-betrayal. So every once in a while, I like to go back over my own past relationships and even look at my relationship with my husband and look at mistakes that I made in those relationships, look at some of the lessons learned, and consider how I can be better. So how I can be better to myself. Are there boundaries? Are there more expectations that I need to set with my husband, with friends, with other people in my life? And also, of course, how I can be better to those people too. I want to be a better wife, a better daughter, a better friend, a better sister to all of my loved ones. So, I think taking that time to reflect is really important. And one of the things that has been reoccurring for me, and I've also noticed it being a pattern in my clients too, is this idea of sometimes abandoning yourself. So what I mean is, oftentimes for the women I work with, one of the hardest things that they deal with is a relationship ends and they thought that, this guy was the one. They thought that this was their person, the person that they were going to marry and spend the rest of their lives with. Or even a friendship. They thought that this person that they became friends with was going to be a forever friendship, right? And then it turns out not to be that way because something happened. Maybe it was cheating. Maybe it was just the person disrespecting their boundaries. And I don't mean just because that is a serious thing. But whatever the case may be, they wonder, okay, I put all of this faith and trust into another person. I allowed myself to open up to them and to be really vulnerable to them. And then it didn't work out. So how can I trust that if I enter into another situation like this again, I'm not going to get played, right? And discernment is important. I don't want to discount how important discernment is. That is something that I very much work with my clients on, is learning how to not only attract better, but choose better. When you have options, being able to really evaluate a person for red flags, being able to really sit with how this person makes you feel, whether or not this person can be a safe space for you. So it's very important. But at the same time, oftentimes the deeper fear is that we're going to put so much into this relationship, and then when it ends, we're not going to be okay, that we're just going to fall apart without the other person because we've put so much into them. We've leaned so heavily into this relationship. And I wanted to talk about a few of the ways that this happens. So I did not take any notes for this episode. This is going to be very off the cuff, so I don't know how many points I'm going to be making. But this was just really on my heart to talk about. So I hope that you will forgive me for being really off the cuff today. And also for not having a set number of points. Maybe we can correct that in the show notes. But one of the first things I want to talk about is not understanding why you're getting into relationships to begin with. So it is really important in order to have a healthy relationship that that relationship be aligned with your values and that it be aligned with certain expectations. And if you're just getting into relationships for the sake of getting into them, maybe all of your friends are in relationships and you think that you should be too, or you think that, the clock is ticking, so you should just hop into one. Even with friendships, if, as a business owner, the whole boss babe movement is empowering, but it's also sometimes annoying because you get these messages on social media that like I should be going to every single networking event and I should be making a ton of friends at all of these events. And that if I'm not doing collaborations with this person or that person, then I'm no one, right? So people oftentimes get into relationships, romantic or otherwise, because they feel like that's what they should do without really evaluating what their purpose is. So, in the case of friendships, you should be actively looking for new friends because you realize that the friends that you have aren't as ambitious as you are, don't have the same type of goals, and you want a circle that's really motivating you and encouraging you like that. Or the friendships that you haven't been reciprocal. So you are looking for friends who are going to reciprocate, who help you feel safe and supported. You should have a reason for seeking those new relationships so that then you can set expectations accordingly. And of course, the same goes with a romantic relationship. So it's not just you want to get married or you want to have a long-term relationship or you want to have a child. So you're looking for someone who's going to be the good father to your future children. Those things are important, but I want you to dig deeper than that, right? So, for me, one of the reasons why I started, actively seeking a husband was because, yes, I did want to get married and I do plan on having a child, if not children. Like I do want those things, right? But also, for me, there's so many reasons for why marriage, right? As opposed to just why not date for the rest of my life, or why not have like a Oprah and Stedman type situation, right? I specifically wanted marriage because I see it as providing that stable container for the child that I want to have. I see it as having a partner to work with and breaking generational curses, and just generational unhealthy habits, the ones that are in my family and the ones that are in his family. We can work together to address those, and support each other in that. I want to create generational blessings and generational wealth. And I feel that that is easier in a marriage than just if I were single for the rest of my life. So when I was looking for that partner for me, getting really clear on what my reasons were, getting really clear on the values that I was bringing into a marriage, it really honed my discernment. And it also, it gave me a mission. I feel like we talk about this all the time in corporate environments, right? Companies have missions. Companies have, these reasonings for doing things the way they do, for having company culture. And you will, if you work in a corporate environment, you will see it everywhere. You will see mission statements. You will get reminded that like this is why we do things this way. Other companies may cut corners, but we don't because of this. Or it is really important to us that we give great returns back to our shareholders. That's a huge value of ours. And you hear this in corporations, but people don't take the time to really create that sort of mission statement for themselves. And once you do that, the reason behind a mission is that it gives you the sense of purpose, and it gives you the sense of conviction. It makes you less likely to stray from values. So when you create this sort of mission statement within yourself, what you hope the outcome of your ultimate relationship will be, it gives you more conviction to walk away from anything that doesn't look like that. Another way in which we betray ourselves is settling too much. So there's a balance. Whenever I start working with a woman, I ask her to create a love list of the things that she wants in a relationship. And, I've seen it. I have seen women come to me with love lists that are 4 or 5 pages long, and they refuse to compromise on anything. Like, the man has to meet every single thing on that 4 or 5 page list. And yes, that is team too much. But one of the things that I specifically ask my clients to do when they create that love list is to, keep it to a certain length, but also to prioritize it and to focus on what are really the most important qualities on that list. And this is crucial because it's one thing to prefer certain things. It's one thing to prefer men who are over 6 feet tall and meet a man who is 5'9", 5'10", and decide that, because he has everything else you're looking for in a relationship, that you'll be with him and, get over the fact that he's not over 6 feet tall. But it's a completely different thing altogether when you have something on that love list that is a core value of yours, something that is a major standard, major expectation of yours, and you compromise that because you think that beyond that he looks good enough on paper, or because you are at a point where you want so badly to be in a relationship that you're willing to settle on some really core values of yours. So this is something that is going to be deeply personal, and you really have to take the time to figure out what is most important to you. So I don't want to give a whole lot of examples of this one because I don't want to sway you one way or the other. I really want you to do that work for yourself. But I do think an example here is necessary. So I'll give one. For me, when I was looking for the man that I was going to marry, it was really important to me that he was not prone to a lot of vices, especially alcohol. I didn't want someone who was a heavy drinker. And the reason why I did not want that is because in my family, there are some people who are alcoholic. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, had drinking issues. And, addiction is tough. And I can't imagine how hard it would be to become addicted to a substance and to struggle with that all the time. So I don't want to ever minimize anyone's battle. But here's what I do know. I do know that there is a genetic component to addiction and to alcoholism. So, this is one of the reasons why I'm not a heavy drinker myself. I always hate that question at the doctor's office when they ask, do you drink alcohol? Because I feel like if I say no, I'm lying. But literally, when I say I drink alcohol, that means that like I might have a glass of wine like once a year. Like, like my husband and I might have a glass at like our anniversary dinner, and that's pretty much the only time you'll see us drink. So, saying yes kind of implies a habit that isn't there. But I say this because there is that component in my family. I'm very wary of that. And it's something that when I think about having children, like, I want to set them up for success as much as possible, right? So being with someone who had that particular habit, who had that kind of vice, was just a no for me. And, I will say, I made that mistake myself, actually, years ago. I ended up in a relationship with someone who was a heavy drinker. And even then, I had that value. But because I really wanted to be in a relationship, and because everything else seemed fine and great with him, he very much was a functioning alcoholic. If I'm not sure that's really a real thing, honestly. Like, I believe people can deal with alcoholism and function well for a while, but I feel like it always comes out. And in the case of that relationship, it did. And when it did, it was a disaster. So, like, I'm speaking on personal experience from this one. When you compromise something that is a core value of yours, or when you have certain boundaries of yours that a person walks all over and you allow them to walk all over because you don't want to make a big scene, you don't want to cause a fuss, you don't want to lose this person over this quote unquote tiny thing that is actually a big thing, you will always set yourself up for disappointment. And you will also set yourself up for some very unhealthy relationships. The worst case scenario is that you compromise on something and you find out that allowing a person with this trait into your life turns out to be like a dangerous situation. That is what happened to me. I ended up with someone who, at some point he drank too much and he became like abusive. So not like abusive. He became abusive. So that's the worst case scenario. But even the best case scenario is you end up in a relationship after you've compromised a major boundary of yours or a major standard of yours, and the relationship isn't terrible. It's not bad. He's not dangerous. He treats you fairly well, but because he lacks something that was really important to you, you will still build up resentment towards him. And you'll never truly be happy in this relationship. Like, that's the best case. That's not something that you want to do. Another way we betray ourselves, and I really want to keep this episode short, so I think this will be my final point. But another way we betray ourselves in relationships is we betray the things that make us us. So this means, how often do you see it? Even if you don't want to talk about yourself right now, How often do you see this in a friend of yours, that she gets into a relationship and all of a sudden her me time is out the window? She's no longer doing the whole self-care thing because all of her time is spent with her partner. She's no longer hanging out with you and, enjoying those friendships because all of her time is spent with a partner. How often do you see women give up hobbies of theirs, interests of theirs, because the person that they're dating doesn't think that those things are cool? How often do you see women taking a back seat in their careers or just giving up really important aspects of their lives because of the person that they're with? The example I can give from my own life is being a Christian. And, my faith is really important to me. This is why I only work with women who have, women who consider themselves to be very spiritual. So, the majority of my clients are Christian, but I also work with women who are Muslim, who are Hindu, who are Jewish, women who just consider themselves in general spiritual and not necessarily a, particular religion. When I was in college, one of the many things I've studied, was I had a minor in religious studies, and, I love helping other people explore their faith and their spirituality more. And I also just believe it's so important to have that foundation to build the rest of your life upon. So I like working with women who believe the same thing. Whatever their particular faith is, they consider it to be very foundational to how they operate the rest of their lives. So I say that because I found myself in relationships when I was young and dumb, particularly in my early 20s, with with men who discouraged me from pursuing my faith. So that could have looked like, while I was dating them, I stopped going to church. Or it could have looked like, when I was dating them, I didn't pray and meditate as often as I did because they found it to be silly and I was embarrassed doing it in front of them. And again, I consider my faith to be very foundational to my life. So when I was in those relationships and I stopped doing those things, it made my life feel less peaceful, more chaotic. And then when the relationship ended, it even, it added to that chaos. It added to that instability. So again, I think that this is the reason why breakups, the end of relationships in general, are so hard for many of us. It's not just the end of the relationship, which in itself can be traumatic, right? It is also the fact that if over the course of this relationship, you somehow lost yourself because you didn't have a firm standing going into the relationship to begin with, because you didn't know what you really wanted, or because you betrayed your standards and you allowed someone to overrule your boundaries, or if it's because you kind of lost yourself as a person in the pursuit of being in a relationship with someone. When the relationship ends and you realize that not only did that person betray you or abandon you, but you also betrayed yourself. You also abandoned yourself. And then it's double recovery, right? Because you're not only having to deal with your lessons learned from this other person and heal and get over that person, you're also having to heal from the ways in which you broke your own self. Whereas if you enter a relationship as a whole person, as a healed person. And I want to make this clear that that's relative, because we are always growing and improving. So this is not to say that you can't date while you're working on yourself, but you do want to have a foundation of working on yourself before you enter into relationships. And especially if you've been through anything that is traumatic, or if you've had your heart broken before in a couple of relationships, then you definitely want to have some support too, in the form of a therapist or a counselor or a coach like me. You want to have that accountability, that support, that person who can hold a safe space for you while you're navigating getting out in the dating scene. But when you have to heal from not only that person, but also having to heal from breaking yourself, that is truly a difficult thing to do. And it's no wonder why you would be reluctant to get into another relationship, because you are, if you haven't really taken the time to deal with that, if you haven't taken the time to ask yourself why you didn't listen to yourself, why you ignored the red flags, why you betrayed yourself and your standards. If you haven't taken the time to ask those questions, if you haven't taken the time to pray or meditate or really journal out, concentrate on the answers to those, if you haven't taken the time to put the systems in place so that you don't do those things again, then essentially every relationship going forward can end the same way. Because if you don't have this firm foundation within yourself, if you don't trust yourself, if you don't have that commitment to yourself to uphold your standards, to uphold your boundaries, you will constantly find yourself in situations where you cave to the wants, to the pleasures, to the whims of other people. You will find yourself in positions where you easily betray yourself. And again, the best case scenario for those relationships is that you end up resenting people around you. So you never understand what it's like to have that safe space, to feel safe with someone else, truly feel loved, to feel cherished, because you'll never be able to feel safe with other people if you don't have that safety within yourself first. So this is something I want you to think about. I want you to take the time today to look at some of your past relationships and ask yourself, have you ever betrayed yourself in a relationship? Have you ever abandoned yourself in a relationship? And if so, I want you to ask yourself why. So I hope I've given you something to think about. I hope that I've convinced you to be serious about self-love and self-care, because I know those are cute hashtags on Instagram, right? But they are also just the key, the cornerstone to having healthy relationships with other people. We teach people how to treat us, how to love us. So when we don't have that love for ourselves, we can't expect other people to love us the way that we need to be loved. So just some food for thought for you. And, if you want to share any revelations with me, I would welcome that. I am on both TikTok and Instagram at Keshia Rice. So feel free to message me, share your takeaways, and I will talk to you soon. Love you so much. Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeshiaRice.com/links. That's KeshiaRice.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.